Okay, so today's guest is someone whose story is not only inspiring, it's a powerful reminder of why mental health conversations matter. We're joined by Oly Newton, founder of Lights on XP, a speaker, mental health advocate, and someone who's turned his own lived experience with OCD and ADHD into a mission to help others. So whether you're someone navigating your own mental health journey, supporting someone else, or just curious about how we can all do better as a community, this is a conversation and a podcast you don't want to miss. Oly, welcome. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Yeah. And happy birthday.
Thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Navigating the last year of my 40s.
Wow. I'm sure you wouldn't have thought it.
No, thank you.
100%.
No. Appreciate that. So it's great that you're here. We've been threatening to do this for quite a few years.
Yeah. It's the only time I could get you and find you.
Well, I know you're a busy man too, so we'll take some shared responsibility for that one. But we're here, and that's what's important, and it's really great to have you here. I know a little bit about you and your journey, and I think your story is extremely powerful. I think that the work that you do is super important, particularly in some of the industries you're working in. But let's start at the beginning. And if you could tell me a little bit about your personal journey and what really sparked off your inspiration to get into mental health advocacy.
Yeah, I guess it all came from my own lived experience, but from a really, really young age, being 6-7 years old, I remember that I knew I was a little bit different. There was sort of really early warning signs that people sort of saw. They didn't really, it wasn't really understood like it is today. But and for me, I had no idea really what was going on. I remember the first time I guess I knew I was a little bit different. I was on holiday with my family in Menorca, and we were walking down the street, and I touched this lamppost with my right hand, and I carried on walking. And then after about 100 metres, I just had this overwhelming fear that if I didn't go back and touch it, that my whole family were going to die. So I ran back, touched it, saved everyone's life. Well, that's what I felt like. But it was the start of something that was going to make my childhood pretty difficult. These things were sort of creeping into all of my routine times. Evening, I'd start to do these checks of my wardrobes before I went to bed. And it started off by quite innocent, just doing one check. I think I'd seen a film on monsters or something when I was 7 years old. And I was like, I wonder if there's monsters in my cupboard, and started doing these little checks. And it started off by doing one, and then every time I made a mistake, it sort of built a further ritual into the following night's routine. And then in the space of probably 2 or 3 months, I was up to doing 40, 50 checks. Some nights it was taking me an hour and a half just to get into bed. And yeah, my dad still to this day, bless him, he still jokes about the fact that his biggest mistake in life was putting laminate flooring in my bedroom, because he was in the bedroom underneath me. He used to say it was like sleeping on the Sheffield Greyhound track. So I was going around my room and no one really knew what was going on, and I'd go down in the morning, but because of all these things I was doing, they were all really linked to that same way of thinking, that if I don't do it, if I tell them, then that thing's going to happen. So I was always about trying to keep everybody alive, which was difficult as a kid because it made no sense now looking back. But I couldn't explain it to anyone.
It's a huge burden, isn't it, and responsibility that you had upon yourself.
Massively, yeah, and it was difficult, but I was really lucky growing up. So there was the sort of good far outweighed the bad. I grew up in a lovely area not far from here in Ecclesall, and I had great access to things like sport, a good school, good people, good friends, and incredible family. But it was and I guess that's why what happened to me later in life, why I think people were probably more surprised than anyone, because actually during school I was that guy who brought everyone together, big friendship circles. Probably looking back, the typical ADHD undiagnosed child, just the centre of attention, the funny one, the one that when we discovered drinking drank way more than anyone else. When we discovered cigarettes, smoked too many cigarettes. When I discovered gambling, I gambled too much. It was just always a little bit too much. But thankfully my mum was a school nurse and I never touched drugs, and I'm really grateful I didn't, because I think my story could have been very different. But at the age of 21, I went from being that guy that brought everyone together, the party starter, growing up we had everyone around our house on a weekend, to literally being totally trapped and consumed overnight. It went from one comment that someone made just flipped a switch in my mind and everything went dark.
And what was that comment?
It was to do with, it was someone on the outer circles of our friendship group had cheated on his partner the night before, and I'd seen him do it. And my morals were off the chain, and I questioned him, and he sort of turned around to me and he said, well, I don't remember doing it, so it didn't happen. And I went, well, I saw it, and it definitely did happen. And something with that, rather than me being annoyed with him, strangely, I started to doubt myself. Like, imagine if you've done something, Ollie, and you don't remember doing it. And it started off with this one thought, and then it just snowballed, and it started off being about cheating. Imagine if you cheated. So I was in a relationship at the time. I was quite settled and happy, and it was a good relationship. And I started to think, well, what happens if I did something on this night out? And I'd go through the night out with a toothpick and create these false memories and start to spiral with anxiety. And I quickly found myself in a state of depression, which actually went on to last 10 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And how old are you at this point?
Yeah, so 21 to 31, I see it as almost losing 10 years of my life to this mental illness. And it started off being about cheating, but then it soon became about everything that was morally against. So I could watch the news and someone had been attacked a mile down the road, or it's just something low, and my mind would be like, imagine if you did that. Imagine if that was you. And then I'd almost live the fear and guilt, knowing full well I've not done it, but I'd live it as I'd physically done it. And it was it was scary. So anything you can think of that you're morally against, my mind was telling me that could be that person. I could have hurt people, harmed people, all these things that you can think about that are unlawful. And quickly, within the space of probably around about 2 years, I discovered the iPhone note section as a way of almost documenting my every move, because there was a date and time stamp for everything. And I couldn't look at another girl in the eyes. My mind was you've done something unlawful. I couldn't look at a guy. My mind was saying you could have hurt them or harmed them. And I was having to write note after note after note everywhere I went. So I sort of stopped going out. And it was just, it's impossible. And then I'd get home on a night and I'd sort of read back through my whole day just to reassure myself I'd not done anything wrong. And it was just, scary, really. Such a scary period.
So this is 21 to 31, and it sounds like it was extremely frightening.
Yeah.
And at what point were you able to sort of share your feelings with somebody and what was going on for you? And who was that person?
Yeah, so it's actually a really nice story in some respects, because I made a really bad decision. I ended up taking a job in Spain really early on, when things started to really fall apart. And the reason in my mind why I did it was I thought, my mum and dad are asking what's going on. They're worrying about me. Why aren't you going out? Why aren't you doing these things? Why aren't you around your friends anymore? What's happening? And then friends were going, where is he? And I was thinking, the best thing I can do here is take this job that I've been offered around the same time everything fell apart. And I was working in the gambling industry at the time. They offered me to go and work over in Gibraltar, living in Spain. Right. So I ended up taking that job. And after about probably 6 months of being there, it was getting to a stage where, and this didn't happen too long, but I was almost drinking some nights just to get to sleep. And I wasn't, I cut that out quite quickly, but it was that bad when I was over there that I remember being there's a smoking area at the workplace I worked at, and it was 7 floors up, and I was looking over the edge, and my mind was saying give up constantly. And I kept on going up there, and I kept on having those thoughts, and I was but I didn't want to. It was it was a strange feeling. It was almost it felt like that was the only way out, but I knew I had to keep going, and all I could think about was my mum, my dad, and my family, and I was no, I can't do this. But that one of those days on the way home from work, I ended up bumping into a guy called Ash, and Ash was someone I trained when we first moved over. Prior to us just moving over, sorry. So he'd come into the company, and I trained him up, and he saw me walking home, and he came up to me and he went, "There's something not right about you." And I was I didn't know what to say, because I was afraid of the thoughts I was having. It didn't feel like I could tell anyone what I was thinking anyway, because it was too frightening. But luckily, Ash had moved over with his partner, Gemma, and Gemma worked in the hospital. She was a psychiatrist. And she was I'm going to send my partner around to come and speak to you. And she sort of came round to my flat, and she sat me down. She took her 5 minutes, and she just went, "I know exactly what's wrong with you. You've got OCD." And I just went, there's no way this is OCD. I was like, the first thing they said is, look at the state of my flat. Like, does it look like I've been tidying up all day? And, you know, and that's because of that media misrepresentation, you know, how it's always, this is often misconceived, isn't it? But also, no one really knows, unless you really know, how, you know, that OCD ranks in the top 10 most debilitating diseases in the world in the way of loss of life, loss of earnings, and how debilitating it really can be, because it's not just about the rituals and the routines, it's about the obsessive thoughts that almost convince you that you're something that you're absolutely not. And she said, look, you've just got it severely. And she talked to me about the different types of OCD, which were very relevant to me, like our OCD, which is like relationship OCD. So I was always like trying to escape relationships after that, because I was thinking, you know, have I cheated? Have I done something bad? And then, you know, OCD, pure OCD, you know, these thoughts constantly, all day long, that you're doing something wrong, you're a bad person. And I can see why, you know, probably so many people don't even get that diagnosis and don't even make it through it, because it's terrifying. Like it's telling you that you're everything that you know you're not.
I really appreciate you sharing that. It's given me some really good insight into you and how you've arrived at where you have today. And I think it's a really powerful sort of story and explanation. And my heart goes out to you in that sense, because that must have been very difficult to live with. And in isolation, away from home, you're in Gibraltar, you're working in an industry you probably don't really want to be working in.
Yeah.
You're not surrounded by people that you know particularly well, but somebody was able to come in that white night and come in and help you.
Absolutely.
So It sounds like the diagnosis that she gave you at that point was almost rejected by you. Like, this 100%. Isn't really what it is. But I think you touched on something really important then. You talk about the misrepresentation in media around sort of mental health. And I think also that links nicely into, you know, ADHD. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that as well, because, you know, OCD, ADHD, there's very probably entwined. Some interlinked presentations and processes and what have you. But the misrepresentation that we're seeing in the media, I think, around what it is, i.e. it's hyperactivity, it's that kid running around with a bin on his head in class. Yeah. It's all of those things when you go, well, actually, it's not that. What's your experience of ADHD and living with ADHD as an adult? Yeah,
so, I mean, when I talked about those things where it was always searching for something else, like dopamine hit, whether I was probably drinking too much, whether it was gambling too much, I feel that's probably down to ADHD. And as a child in secondary school, they were always telling me that they think I had it, but it was, we're talking 20 odd years ago now, and they were saying, oh, we don't think he's naughty enough to have it. That's what the teachers were saying to my mum and dad. So obviously that, I don't blame anyone for that, because actually looking back, when you think about the kids who were getting the diagnosis, there were the kids that were maybe a little bit more troublesome, but in a way, you know, doing more damage and a bit more sort of malicious in some ways, and which is obviously again a misrepresentation of what ADHD is. And, you know, for me it was difficult because I could have done with that extra support when I was younger with exams and that little bit of extra time. Some days I'd finish a class before anyone had even started, and some days I'd, you know, and most days I'd be, you know, I'd really struggle to even keep up, to focus, to learn like, you know, the other kids. And maybe if I'd had a little bit of support back then, like, you know, a bit more of an understanding, it might have been a little bit easier. But it was obvious I had it, but I guess it wasn't really until around about 3.5 years ago now, I just started up the business properly, and I was opening my laptop to start work in the morning, and then I'd be like, I knew I had to do loads of things. Like I knew I had to like get back to loads of people on email, create some stuff for the marketing side of things, and I was like, and then I'd look at the clock and it'd be like 9 a.m, then I'd look at the clock again and it'd be like 3 p.m, and I hadn't done anything but probably spent about 300 quid on Amazon, and just, you know, and yeah, I wasn't actually doing what I was meant to be doing. So, and it was really lucky I met a girl called Kate who I brought on board to do some mental health. Well, she actually took me under her wing, and when I became an instructor through Mental Health First Aid England to train mental health first aiders, and we've trained like together, like, you know, about 1,000 mental health first aiders now across the UK together, and it's been brilliant. But she sort of noticed straight away, and she was going through this process, but through the NHS, and she'd waited ages, and she was like, look, I'm certain you've got ADHD. I'm certain, like, this is what it is. And I was like, well, okay, what do I need to do? And I at that stage, I thought, and was thankfully in a position where my family and I had a bit of money to put together to get an actual diagnosis quicker, because I was like, I'm not waiting anymore for anything.
Yes.
Like, I was sick of waiting. I'd waited 10 years over like different periods for different levels of support, and I was like, look, if this is what it is, I'm not waiting. And I remember going over to London to get the diagnosis, and it was a friend of mine who told me about this guy who he'd seen, and he was like, yeah, you should speak to this guy. Ended up going. The guy said, straight away, you've definitely got, ADHD. I had I had the whole thing, and then put me on the medication. And actually, the medication, I honestly believe, has been huge for me. Like, it's given me a totally new lease of life.
That's it. And I think that's really important to hear, because, a lot of people who are thinking about having an ADHD assessment and diagnosis, the consideration then is treatment, and what is that? And is that medication, or is that more of a sort of a coaching therapeutic route? But I'd be really interested to hear how ADHD medication is improving, if I can use that word,
100%.
improving your life and your capability.
Yeah, the doctor made a really valid point, because I was worried, because obviously, like with me, running was the thing for me that helped me, and I was like, I don't want to be on something that's going to like tranquilize me or like stop me doing, like, make me feel any. And I was always a bit skeptical about medication, because I've never really found anything that I felt has worked for me through like my mental health. And I know with OCD, like, medication, there's not, as far as I'm aware, and when I last checked, there's not really a specific drug that's ever been designed to support someone with OCD. It's just treated as like an anxiety disorder, and then you get a certain medication that might help. So I was always really like, I've been on the medication, the antidepressants, but it's I feel like it's a bit of a placebo sort of thing now. I don't really think I don't know if it's helping me or not, and I don't want to come off it, because I know if I do, it's gonna be difficult. But yeah, the medications for the ADHD, I remember like when I said that to him, I was like, it's not going to make. He like pulled his chair up and he went, "You've got nothing to worry about." He actually said to me, it was funny. He said, "These aren't going to make you worse. These, my friend, are performance enhancing drugs." Right. That's what he said to me, and he said these are not allowed in the Olympics. And he was right. I mean, I ran.
So you're going further and faster.
I ran 4 minutes off I ran a 4-minute PB on my half marathon that weekend. On the first weekend I'd been on it, but I mean, no, I think I was in a good place. I'd trained hard for that, so it probably wasn't that. But yeah, that's what he said, and I'll never forget it. It was quite funny. But what he did say to me, he said, "Look, you need to the things with these medication, and I'm talking about Elvance is what he put me on. Is he said these will not do the work for you, but if you take them in the morning and you start, they will help you get through the day." And that's exactly what happens. Like I get like 6-7 hours every single day of like focus,
right? And
I get things done, and the maddest thing about the whole medication situation is you mentioned a minute ago about like OCD, ADHD, are they entwined, are they interlinked? Well, I'm certain they are, and when I look back now, it's hard to decipher what is OCD and what is ADHD, because like what it's enabled me to do is it's enabled me to control my thoughts, which I could never do before.
Okay.
So not only did it enable me to actually get my work done, it enables me to be a better speaker, deliver talks. I don't feel absolutely burnt out every day now at the end of the day like I was, just trying to get through each day. I don't drink caffeine or anything like that, because I just, I felt like I needed that before, but I stopped that as soon as I started taking the meds. But it enables me to actually control these horrible thoughts. So even when they come in now, it's almost like I can manage it. I can deal with it. They don't hit me in the same way, and they don't take me on that awful path where one thought can lead to like 3 months of like struggle.
Yes, keeps you in the game.
Absolutely,
you're locked in. Yeah, you're not procrastinating.
And work better. Doing work wise, it's from being on their meds. It's changed everything for me.
Well, it's great that you have been able to do that and be open-minded and can see the benefits from the medication. You touched on running there, and I do want to talk a bit more about that, because that's clearly a passion for you, and a way that you're able to continue to manage your mental, physical, spiritual health and keep yourself fit and balanced, I'm assuming. But yeah, just tell me a little bit about your passion for running and what that does for you.
Yeah, so it was probably, it was around 10 years into that journey, and 7 years ago now, that I ended up getting signed off long-term sick. And I think it was the third time. But this time I told him what was really wrong with me. And it was a manager who put his hand on my shoulder. It was like, again, we're worried about you. And I was like, I'm worried about myself. And I burst out, into tears, and I was crying. I was saying, look, I don't know what to do. I've been stuck like this for 10 years now. What I don't know how to change anything. And I was working for, I was in the sports betting industry again. I fell back into it, and they really looked after me. They were a really good company, Sky Betting and Gaming, and they basically said to me, look, take some time off. You can take up to 3 months off, and we'll support you and we'll help you and we'll get you some therapy. And I didn't even realise that private healthcare was there. And my journey with therapy has been it's been different to other people. I'm a massive advocate for it because I feel like so many people benefit from it. But I think for me, it was people that really helped me, and the running. And the running came about after that been signed off that day. I woke up the next morning, read out outside. I was like, I need to do something. And I remember I was almost stuck in these ways prior to that, where I'd know it was like 7, 8 in the morning, so I could hear the kids running around, but I would never open my eyes until probably 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because I was terrified of facing the day. And I always started work at 2 and finished at 12 at night. Yeah. So it was just this brutal existence of just living, trying to work, working from home at times. And it was so tough, because they were the times when the office was quiet as well. And I ended up going into my cupboard, pulling out some old gym kits, some old trainers I'd not worn for like 10 years, and left the house, started to walk a little bit, and then I started to run. I honestly believe the decision I made that day saved my life, probably changed my life forever. And it was after the run when I stopped. I think I'd ran like maybe 5 kilometres, but like ran and walked 40 minutes or something. And when I stopped, just everything in my mind stopped, like for the first time in like 10 years.
Yes. And
it lasted 5 minutes, but I lived for that feeling. And since then, every single day for the last 7 years, I've ran, averaged 10 kilometres a day for 7 years, 24,000 kilometres. And running, I guess, for me was like, it's strange. It was like, it's like the thoughts are chasing me. The further I got, the easier it got. It's hilarious. Some days my missus would be ringing me. I live in Leeds. She's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm in Bradford. She's like, well, how long are you going to be? I'll be probably about 2 hours. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm really sorry. And then now she can track me now, so it's even worse. But she knows, yeah. So she
feels safer.
Yeah, it's better. It's better in some respects. But yeah, it was a huge turning point for me. But truthfully, the running, I thought straight away, I need to do something about this. If this is helping me, it can help other people. And I set up a mental health support page called Run For Your Mind, and I started to initially I was behind the camera, but you couldn't see me, so it was I was sort of sharing some of the struggles, and I was like, I'm going to show people who I am. And then from there we just built a nice community. We've got a running club that's got thousands of runners in around the world, and got people talking about stuff. And I thought this is great. I think a lot of people feel like this when they struggle. They think that when they can't help themselves, they can probably help other people. But actually, in turn, it was massively helping me understand myself. People coming to me saying, I understand that. I have them thoughts about, I've been about cheating. I've had them thoughts about hurting people and harming people. And all of a sudden, you feel like you're not on your own.
It's building that connection.
Absolutely,
isn't it? Through communication. And if you're able to share your experience and other people and it resonates with other people, and they can connect to that in you helping them, they're helping you, because they're coming back and going,
exactly,
Ollie, I feel the same.
Yeah.
That's what I get. When you were talking about that 5 minutes of peace and serenity and tranquility from running, the only time I ever get that is when I'm in an ice bath.
Yeah.
Because it just, boom.
You've got no choice.
It just stopped.
And it lasts forever as well.
All I'm trying to do is remember how to breathe.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. But I like what you're talking there about recovery. It's
100%.
Recovery, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's it. And when we talk about recovery, we talk about the clinical route. We talk. There's another route that we don't really talk about, the second route, which is your personal recovery. And I think that's my message to anyone. it's sometimes about learning to live with what you're struggling with and how do you manage it. And that's what I guess running enabled me to do. It enabled me to manage those days. But do you know, in them moments, like, you know, the further I ran, some days I might have an hour. And then in them hours, I thought about the future for the first time. I was able to propose to my partner. I was able to do the things that, you know, people probably just take for granted.
Sure.
And even though the running, I guess, over that first 3.5 years was huge, and it was, you know, it made a massive difference to me, my life. But truthfully, like, I was still really socially anxious. So like, I really struggled. And like, I really struggled to, you know, I missed so many things during that period, you know, like big events, birthdays, and things like that, where I couldn't really attend because I was struggling that bad. And, you know, looking back, it's really sad. But then I think the turning point for me was probably like 3.5 years into that running journey, when I read this quote in a book about learning to become comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And I remember running downstairs to my missus, and I was like, this is what I need to do. She's like, what are you on about? I need to learn to become comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And we sort of sat back and we were like, well, what's the most we had this like idea that if I could conquer the most difficult thing, then maybe I'd start being able to do the things that most people take for granted again.
What was the most difficult thing?
Yeah, it all came down to one thing, and that was speaking in front of people.
Okay.
I couldn't do it. So we set myself a challenge to try and do that, and then that's what's led to what I do today.
How did you do that? What was your route to being able to stand in front of people and talk, bearing in mind you could not do it?
I know. So the route came around about 6 months after that. So I wasn't looking for it. But the workplace I was at the time, someone put out something across like the comms about they were doing something called the Untold Stories of the Business. And every year they had this event, and this year it was in like this big bunker, like old like airport bunker in Leeds, and they were like, they'd hired it all out. It was like actually on the set of Victoria, so the ITV production. And they were saying they were doing the Untold Stories of the Business, and everyone was like tagging me in it, like, you need to do this. And then eventually they made me do it, and I was like, I remember sitting on there. It was surreal. I was actually sat on Victoria's bed delivering my first talk. I'm not joking. I'll show you the picture. Yeah. And with someone else hosting, and then, you know, I shared the story in front of 300 people, and genuinely I had like anxiety on top of anxiety on top of anxiety. But after that, a couple of the managers took me to one side, and they were like, you need to leave the business. You need to be doing this.
Really?
You should be doing this full time. And from there, they helped me, which is, again, unbelievable for a large corporate organisation. They were like, you need to be doing this, and we're going to help you. We're going to help you get onto a speaking course so you can become a better speaker. We're going to help you to do some training to become a mental health trainer. We're going to help you with all these little things, because they had something at the workplace called the Ninja Fund, where you could access like £1,000 a year to do like certain things for your own personal development.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what happened. And then they just pushed me out the door, and then from there, I guess the rest is history.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
it's so great. And I think what's beautiful about that is, well, two things. A, that you were able to identify what your biggest fear was.
Absolutely, yeah.
Secondly, you were able to do something about it. And thirdly, you were supported.
Yeah.
And that, if you think about that and applying that to life in all aspects,
100%.
Yeah, if we can identify, and we sometimes need help in identifying it, because we don't know what it is necessarily, that one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I try and, you know, say to young people, like to some people, like for me, you know, prior to that, my biggest thing was, you know, just being opening my eyes in the morning. You know, whereas some people you might have kids or young people who aspire to climb Mount Everest, whereas some people, their Mount Everest is just getting to school. Do you know what I mean? On a day. So it's like, you know, that's like, you know, the big message for me, and it's, I guess it's sort of created a path that I never saw coming, and it's allowed me to live a life that's very often and every day feels like a dream. So
just on that, then I'm going to talk a little bit about your work, because if we can be doing something that we love, we never work another day in our life.
100%.
Right? Yeah. And it sounds like you are. Because this is our purpose, this is our passion, this is why we're on God's earth, is to deliver this work and to do the things that we do, you know, and to work from the heart, not from the head. And it's very much a feeling and emotional connection with other people. So based on that, you know, what has been your most incredible, successful interaction through the work that you do?
Gosh, that is a difficult question. A lot of things happen, and one of the things that I did do from the very beginning was, I guess, the model that I created for my business when I started to deliver the talks, which I'm, really proud of actually, because it's very different and I've not seen it anywhere else. And what I ended up doing is whenever a corporate booked me to deliver a talk in their organisation, included in the cost that they pay is sponsorship of a local school.
Right.
So for every talk that I deliver in a corporate organisation, that means that a local school will get a free talk. And, sometimes I've got a wait list of schools. I've got a wait list of 140 talks at the minute, which is difficult. But, sometimes the organisation they'll all put their school in a hat that the kids go to, whoever's in the room, and we pull it out, and I can then invite whoever's in charge of that company to come along with that person who's parent, whose kids in the school, and it's brilliant. The impact that we can have is massive, and I think that for me has been some of my favourite work, because ultimately I want to try and be that voice that I really needed when I was a kid, because no one was talking about these things back then. And maybe now what I do find and I do learn is that these kids probably know more than most adults, most parents, and which is great. But what they're maybe not doing is they maybe taught it, but they're not really talking about it, because it takes someone who has lived it to share something that really brings it out. And every school I go to and every group of young people I speak to, there's always a queue of kids wanting to talk about it. And that for me is, the best work, the best thing. I love the corporate stuff, and I love the conversations it creates. And I love to see kids who are really struggling, who then keep in touch and message me like a year later saying, look, I started to speak about these things. And actually, my friend struggled as well. And, we would never have known that. But then there's the difficult side of it as well. Like, we did like a big speaking tour a couple of years ago where we did 100 talks in like 20 days across schools, and it was like a big social impact project. We partnered with some cool companies like Hayes, the recruitment firm. They were massively behind it. We shot a documentary about it, and it was brilliant. But a lot of it's difficult because you're dealing with kids. Like we went to an international school, and this is one of the ones that I found really difficult. We went to this international school, and it was predominantly Muslim kids. And obviously, from a cultural perspective, like we all look at things in different ways, right? And this one kid, there was two kids stayed behind, and I could see they knew each other, but they didn't want to know each other. The other person was staying behind, so they're sort of dipping out, coming back, dipping out as that other person gone. And this lad, and it broke my heart really. He turned around to me and he said, "Look, Ollie, I was bullied," and he said some kid in my old school, was talking about having the same thought process of me as how I believe I've done something I know I'd never do. And he said, "Oh, this kid," he said, "he called me a terrorist, right?" And I was like, "What?" And he went, "Yeah." And he said, "But my mind started to make me believe I could be one, even though I knew I wasn't one." And I said to him, "So who have you spoke to about this?" He says, "I can't talk to anyone about it. You're the first person I've ever spoke to about it." And he said, "Truthfully, Ollie, if it wasn't against my religion to take my life, I wouldn't be here." And that for me was like, wow. Like, and
I can feel the impact of that, just saying it.
Yeah, and it just, and I was like, well, how do we change that? And thankfully they had a really good safeguard lead at the school, and she was actually a white British Muslim, and she was saying to me, "Look, how we go about safeguarding in this school isn't like how another school would. If another kid, sort of like a white British kid would go up and say, I'm struggling, I feel like I've thoughts of taking my own life, we're going to tell his parents because we want them to know, we want to support them." They said in this school, because of the cultural element of it, we just don't tell them. We don't tell the parents, we manage it internally, because we don't know what that impact that might have on him at home and so on, or that person, which really interested me. And I've started now trying to, obviously now I've got a team of speakers who work alongside me, and, I've got someone in that space who now speaks about, predominantly growing up in a South Asian background, but a lot of the cultural stuff it's quite similar, even though it's always different. Yeah.
I think it's really important to be able to create those tailored talks and interventions really that aren't, and that's the difference. Yeah. Really, in terms of what you're doing to to some of the more corporate providers is that it's about you're leading with your heart. You're able to make changes based upon what you see and what you feel, and think actually we can adapt and help more people. It's very important. It's certainly something that's close to my heart in terms of, well, how can we change and influence some of the current structures that sit around drug and alcohol addiction and treatment within particular religious cultures.
Of course,
that means that they're unable to talk about that with their parents or within their community. And it's like, well, people are then isolated. People are suffering. You've talked about your suffering today, and that hurt, that hits my heart when you go, you suffered in silence for a long time until you were able to reach out and connect with somebody, and then they helped you. And it's the thought of young people, and adults suffering in silence about something that could be dealt with and worked through relatively quickly. It's, well, what do we do to initiate that change?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's so important. So what I wanted to ask you is do a bit of a quick fire round. I'll ask you a couple of direct questions now, and we'll keep it short and sweet, and then we can use some of these for shorts. But what inspires you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I think it's it must be that work that I'm doing in the schools. I think that's the thing that really inspires me the most, because I've got kids myself, and I've got 2 kids there. One of them's ADHD and autistic, one of them's ADHD, and we're certain he's also autistic, and he's actually a school refuser at the minute. He's been out of school for 3 months because he's been bullied, and it's been difficult, and it's not something I've been talking too much about, and it makes me quite emotional, as you can probably see.
Sure. But
there's a big problem at the minute in schools, because there's what I would call a gap in schools, where there's kids who aren't managing in mainstream, but certainly don't belong in a specialist school, and would not even be able to get into a specialist school, but they do not belong in mainstream school. So there's this big gap at the minute which kids are falling through, and I honestly believe my son is one of those kids. And so for me, it's what inspires me is how can I interrupt that? How can I make a bit of a change? How can we push to create better opportunities for these kids, to allow them to be more understood and listened to? And he's the loveliest, most caring kid in the world, but he just doesn't manage in that environment. It's too much for him. And then you've got all these other things in place which are what shoes they wear, why do they have to wear a tie? He's autistic, he doesn't want to wear a tie. Do you know, these little things, why are they still in place? Why have we got a uniform why don't we just have one set uniform that's just a polo and they can wear what they want? What difference does it make to their learning? My kid gets sent home because he's wearing black shoes that are kickers, but they're not shoes. That's ridiculous. So that's my inspiration, comes from trying to make a difference in education. Lovely.
Okay. What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear would probably have to be falling back into that trap, which feels like it's always there. It's always constantly on my tail. But if I'm honest, I feel like I'm probably too strong now. But it's always going to be there. You're always scared, aren't you, that something could change, or one little thing, losing somebody or losing something. All these things can one little thing can change everything, can't it?
Yeah, they can be massive contributors. But keep doing what you're doing and keep moving forward in the way that you are, to keep it real, keep it honest. And that's what it's all about. I was talking to a colleague earlier, and it was about, actually, if we're not sharing about things and we're not taking the power out of things, they're living inside us rent free. And when things are inside us rent free, they gather pace, they gather momentum, they gather space in our heart. And we can keep them buried for a certain point, but it reaches a tipping point where it overspills, and that's when we're in the danger zone, and that's when the vulnerability comes. But being honest, being vulnerable, and being able to talk and showing emotion, because that's raw reality of life, and it's beautiful that you're able to do that today with us as well. So the next question, the final question really for this podcast is, what's next on your agenda?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time actually, because I'm working on 2 things at the minute. One of them was when it came to sort of putting a team together and building this team of lived experience speakers. It's quite difficult. It's easy to sell yourself, but it's sometimes more difficult to sell other people, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
And even when they want corporate organisations want to focus on those key dates. So if I've got somebody who talks about eating disorders, there's that one day of the year that everyone wants that one person. So I've been working really hard over the last sort of 6 months to get this learning management system off the ground. So I've got a full learning management system I'm about to launch over the next month or so. Got some really cool talks at tech events to sort of talk about it, and some big events and again it's just sort of bringing all that lived experience stuff into one place where we're going to be able to broadcast talks throughout the year to different organisations. But the cool thing about the platform is it's not just going to be a platform where one company's on there. It's going to be like multiple companies that can log in, where they can collaborate with each other. I want to be able to tell the stories of the other businesses. So anyone who wants to share the story, I want to be talking about that through the platform. But then we've got all of the CPD, accredited e-learning. We've got short videos. We're going to have like subject matter expertise on there as well, which I'd love to get you on to do some stuff. Yeah. But then the key thing is just having something which SMEs can afford, like an affordable subscription model where each month they can subscribe and they can see talks, panel discussions and workshops and so that's where we're at, and it's exciting and just getting everything ready to just flick the switch and let's go. So
that is awesome, and I'd love to be involved in that, and if I can help in any way then I will, because I think it's so important. I've the whole reason why I'm sat here and the reason why I've set this business up and I'm able to help other people is because of my own experience and my own journey.
Which is why I met you in the first place.
Exactly right, and that's what keeps the flame burning in me, is being able to see other people and help other people go on that journey, particularly when they come in and they're hopeless, and we can take them through the process to hopeful, and see 100%. The lights come back on and they become awake again, and it's like, wow, that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing, and I love that. So I'm inspired by that. One last thing I wanted to ask you was that if you rewind to the 23-year-old you, what would you be saying now to that 23-year-old you? I think this is important for somebody who's listening to this who might be experiencing some of the similar things that you've talked about today. What would you be saying to them? What would you be saying to your younger self?
I'd probably be saying you're stronger than you think you are, and you need to speak about it. You need to talk. I certainly, when I look back on my journey, I wouldn't change anything. I feel like maybe it was meant to be, and I'm in a position now which has led to, if you ask any of my mates what I'd be doing when I left school, they'd all say it'll be making a difference. Which no one thought I'd be doing this. I don't even think this was a job. You sort of forge your own path, and I'm grateful for the battles I faced, but I'm not, for anybody who's like me, the big message is look, right, you might need to go and get help. You might need to seek professional help. And if you can't afford to access that straight away and you're told to wait 2 years, don't wait. I don't mean don't wait as in, don't just wait around. Don't just wait around more than anything, actually. Don't just sit there and wait like I did. I took things very literal, and
take
I was
control of your own
find something.
destiny.
And there's some great support out there. One of the apps I talk about, Hub of Hope, incredible. You just put your postcode in, brings up all the local services within your area that are free. And I think people don't always always get that professional help, because it's really important. But actually, people sometimes just need people. And if you can find a group of other people who've got an eating disorder like you have, or you've got OCD like I have, or you might be struggling with addiction, sometimes these peer support groups are all you need. And I was walking down the street the other day in Leeds, and I bumped into someone, and I knew they'd been struggling because I'd been chatting to his partner, and I was just like, there's have you looked at like what support's around here? And we just went on the app, put our postcode in, and there was an Andy's Man Club like 400 metres away from our house.
Right.
And I was like, this might be all you need. Do you know what I mean? And get him there, I'll come with you.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's really powerful, and I think that's what's different now to when I was struggling initially. There really wasn't that support there. And there might have been little groups, but it wasn't like as accessible as it is now. And there's lots of other people doing great things to try and change that, like me, like, yourself, and like everyone, we're all trying to do, it's different.
And absolutely right. And I think, look, if there are people like you around who are willing to cross the street and speak to somebody and put your arm around them and give them a little bit of guidance and show them resources and share your experience, that changes lives. that can change somebody's course, right, and impact them in a very positive way.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that we've got to remind ourselves of that, and then it's good to talk, and if we see somebody struggling, rather than not, because we're worried about saying the wrong thing or them, taking what we've said out of context. For me, really, it's just about putting your arms around someone. Are you all right? I'm a bit worried about you.
Yeah, and listening.
And just,
The hardest thing's to listen sometimes. Like, we always want to try and fix everybody. And I realise now you can't, and sometimes people just want to be heard.
Can be so powerful.
Yeah.
People who come here, when they sit down and we do that introduction bit, they said, well, what's the feedback that you've had from your experience? And said, I feel like I've been heard and I've not been judged.
Yeah. And that's all that matters.
Yeah, because love conquers all, and it's about kindness, it's about compassion, it's about connection, and it's about allowing someone to talk about whatever they want to talk about and being able to listen actively. It's not about fixing everything. We can only move at the pace that somebody's willing to move at. It's about being there along the way, and supporting them on their journey. And ultimately, they've got to make their own decisions as to what they do, what they don't do. We don't have that level of control over anybody other than ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just giving them that, just telling them and teaching them that you can regain some form of control. And I everything you've just said there is exactly, I think, why from the very first moment we met, it was always like, it was great. We're on a very similar mission. And, even more so now from a personal perspective, I'm incredibly grateful for the work you do.
Likewise. Oly, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, mate, thank you. Thanks for having me. Cheers, mate. Cheers.